The night was silent, but inside the large mansion the girl's heart was not. She sat near the window, her hands trembling as she pulled at the silver chain around her neck. Tomorrow was the day her life would no longer belong to her. Tomorrow, she would become the wife of a man she had never chosen. Her name was Elira. She was young, full of questions, and full of dreams. She had always loved the stars. Every night when the world outside was quiet, she would sit and stare at the endless sky. She wanted to fly among those stars to see what was hidden beyond the planets. But her family never cared about her dreams. In her society, daughters were not asked what they wanted. They were told. And Elira had been told that she must marry the son of a powerful family, a man who had wealth, armies, and influence, a man who saw her not as a person but as a tool. Her mother had tried to comfort her. "It is our tradition. It is for the family's honor. You will understand one day." But Elira did not want tradition. She wanted freedom. She wanted to choose her own path, even if it was dangerous. Tonight, the mansion was decorated with golden lights. Servants prepared for the ceremony. Musicians tested their instruments. Everyone was busy, excited. But inside Elira's heart there was only fear. She felt like a bird trapped in a cage. Tomorrow the door of that cage would be locked forever. She remembered the man she was forced to marry. His eyes were cold, like stone. He spoke to her as if she was already his property. "You will be safe in my house. You will stay quiet. You will obey, and you will not complain." His voice had made her blood run cold. The thought of living with him for the rest of her life was unbearable. And the thought that her family had agreed without asking her, that hurt even more. Elira pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window. Outside, the city lights stretched far into the distance. Flying cars moved in lines across the sky. The tall towers glowed with neon colors. Somewhere out there, freedom was waiting. Somewhere out there, she could live her own life. Her chest tightened. She had two choices: accept her fate and lose herself forever, or run away even if it meant never coming back. Her hands shook as she thought about it. Running away meant danger. The city was full of patrols, scanners, and guards. And if she was caught, her punishment would be worse than anything she could imagine. But staying meant death of the soul. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she stepped away from the window and pulled the curtain. A servant knocked on her door. "Lady Elira, your gown is ready. Tomorrow you will shine brighter than the stars." The girl forced a smile and nodded. But when the servant left, her smile disappeared. Brighter than the stars? No. She wanted to be among the stars, not locked in a cage wearing pretty jewels. As the night grew deeper, she made her decision. She would not stay. She would not marry a man she did not love. She would not let her life be written by others. Elira opened the small box under her bed. Inside were a few credits, a scarf, and an old map of the city. She had prepared this months ago in secret. She had always feared this day would come. Her fingers touched the map gently. She knew the streets, the shortcuts, the hidden passages. She knew how to reach the spaceport, but reaching it would not be easy. Guards would patrol the gates, cameras would scan faces, and her family's power stretched across the city. But she was ready. She had no other choice. She sat on her bed, staring at the clock. Each second passed slowly, louder than ever before. Her heart pounded with the rhythm of time. Midnight was near. At midnight, most of the mansion would sleep. That would be her only chance. Elira whispered to herself, "If I fail free. But I will not live as a prisoner." Her reflection in the mirror looked back at her. For the first time, she did not see a scared girl. She saw someone brave, someone ready to risk everything. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed from the streets outside. A patrol drone flew past the mansion, scanning the area with red beams. Elira froze. The city never slept. Danger was everywhere. But her decision did not change. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. Then she stood up and pulled the scarf around her shoulders. She hid the credits inside her pocket. She folded the map and held it tightly. This was it. The beginning of something unknown. The mansion around her was still bright, full of music and laughter. But to Elira, the lights felt like chains and the music felt like warning bells. Every sound reminded her. Time was running out. She stepped closer to the door. Her hand hovered above the handle. Beyond this door, her life would change forever. There was no turning back, and yet she smiled for the first time in days, because tomorrow she was supposed to be a bride. But tonight, she would become something else. A runaway. Midnight came like a shadow. The mansion, which had been full of music and light, was slowly falling into silence. Servants were tired, guests had left, and only a few guards remained, awake. For most people it was a night of rest, but for Elira it was the night of truth. She opened her door carefully, every movement slow and silent. The hallway outside was dim, lit only by faint blue lamps on the walls. Her heart pounded so hard she was afraid it would wake the guards. She clutched her scarf tightly and stepped forward. The air smelled of burning incense, left behind from the evening's rituals. The floor creaked under her weight, and each sound felt like thunder in her ears. Elira paused at every corner, listening for footsteps. But the halls were empty. She moved quickly toward the back of the mansion. There was a servant's door that led into the gardens. She had studied the path in her mind many times. Still, her hands shook as she reached for the latch. Suddenly, a voice echoed behind her. "Who's there?" Her blood froze. A guard stood at the end of the hall, holding a lantern. His eyes narrowed. Elira lowered her head and whispered, "Just a servant, sir." She turned quickly and slipped through the door before he could come closer. The cold night air hit her face. She was outside. The garden stretched around her like a sea of shadows. Tall silver trees swayed gently in the wind, and the sky above was wide and endless. She ran. Her soft shoes barely made a sound as she crossed the grass. The glow from the mansion faded behind her. Freedom was ahead, but danger was never far. Near the garden's edge, a fence of steel blocked her way. It was tall, almost twice her height. She grabbed the bars and pulled herself up. The metal was cold and bit into her hands, but she climbed anyway. Halfway up, a sharp light swept across the garden, a patrol drone. Elira froze, pressing her body against the fence. The red beam scanned across the trees, searching. She held her breath. If the drone detected her, alarms would sound. The marriage would be the least of her worries. The beam passed, and the drone flew away. Elira exhaled slowly, her chest tight with fear. She climbed the last part of the fence and dropped down to the other side. Now she was outside the mansion grounds. The city spread before her like a living machine. Towers of glass rose high into the night sky, their neon lights glowing pink, blue, and green. Sky lanes were filled with moving cars that hummed like bees. Somewhere in that maze of lights was the spaceport. She pulled out her folded map. Her fingers traced the lines. The fastest way was through the old district, a place where machines rusted and few people lived. It was dangerous, but it was her best chance. She walked quickly, keeping to the shadows. Her scarf covered most of her face, hiding her from street cameras. Every corner brought new risks. At times she heard the whir of patrols. At times she saw soldiers standing near gates, but she kept moving. In the distance, she heard a sound that made her stop. Barking. A team of security hounds ran through the alleys, their eyes glowing white. They were hunting something, or someone. Elira's stomach twisted. Had they already discovered her escape? She ducked into a narrow passage between two towers. The walls were damp, covered with graffiti. The hound's steps echoed closer. She pressed herself against the wall, praying they would not notice her. The hounds sniffed the ground, their metallic claws clicking on the pavement. One of them turned its head toward her hiding place. Elira's heart nearly stopped. Then a sudden noise from another street distracted them. The hounds turned and sprinted away. Elira collapsed against the wall, her body shaking. She could not stop now. She had to move faster. She reached the old district as the clock struck 1. The streets were dark, filled with broken machines and abandoned markets. Strange figures sat in corners watching silently. This was not a safe place, but it was safer than being caught. Her feet ached, but she pushed forward. The map said there was a transport hub ahead. If she reached it, she could find a ride to the spaceport. Then a beam of light flashed across her face. "Stop!" a voice shouted. A guard had spotted her. Elira turned and ran, her scarf flying behind her. The guard's boots pounded the ground. More voices joined, echoing in the night. She darted through narrow alleys, jumped over broken crates, and slid under metal gates. Her lungs burned, but adrenaline carried her forward. She could hear the guards shouting, their footsteps closing in. Finally, she burst into a wide street filled with parked hover taxis. Engines hummed softly, waiting for customers. She ran toward them desperately. One door opened suddenly, and a deep voice spoke. "Need a ride?" Elira froze. Inside the taxi sat a man with dark hair and tired eyes. His face was human. Humans were rare here. Most lived as workers or servants, not as taxi drivers. She had never spoken to one before. Behind her, the guards' voices grew louder. They were almost here. She looked at the man, then at the street behind her. She had no choice. She jumped inside the taxi. The man raised an eyebrow, but he only smiled faintly. "Buckle up," he said. The door closed, the engine roared, and the taxi lifted into the air. Elira's escape had only just begun. The taxi lifted into the sky with a sudden force, pressing Elira against the seat. The city lights blurred into long lines of color as the vehicle sped forward. Her hands clutched the edge of the seat, her heart still racing from the chase. For the first time in her life, Elira was sitting next to a human. The driver glanced at her through the rear mirror. His eyes were sharp but calm, as if nothing about this moment surprised him. He had dark hair tied loosely at the back, and his clothes were plain: old jacket, worn gloves, and boots that had seen too many roads. He spoke in a low voice, almost casual. "So, who exactly are you running from?" Elira's lips pressed tightly together. She had no intention of trusting him. Trust was dangerous. "Just drive," she whispered. The driver gave a small laugh, not mocking but amused. "That's usually what people tell me." "Fair enough." He leaned forward slightly, turning the taxi down a side lane where traffic was thinner. Outside, the neon towers glowed brighter. Patrol ships moved overhead, their search beams cutting across the sky like blades of light. Elira sank lower into her seat, pulling her scarf higher over her face. The driver noticed. "Relax. They're too busy scanning the main roads. They don't care about an old taxi like mine." Still, her body trembled. She had escaped the mansion, escaped the guards, escaped the hounds. But now, trapped inside this small vehicle, she was at the mercy of a stranger. Her eyes studied him carefully. A human. In her city, humans were rare, almost invisible. Most worked as laborers in factories or as servants in rich houses. But this man was free, driving his own taxi. That itself felt unusual. The silence stretched until the driver spoke again. "Name's Joran." He tapped the console, as the taxi slid between two glowing towers. "And before you ask, no, I don't care what you've done. Not my business. My business is driving." Elira kept her voice low. "Then drive faster." Joran's smile faded. He adjusted the controls, and the taxi shifted gears with a deep hum. Faster means attention. Attention means patrols. "Do you want the patrols?" She shook her head. "Good. Then sit back and let me do what I do best." For a few minutes, nothing was said. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the engine and the distant roar of traffic. But Elira's thoughts would not rest. Who was this man? Why had he not asked more questions? Why was he helping her at all? She had been taught that humans were desperate, greedy, always willing to sell secrets for credits. Yet this one seemed calm, almost steady. Her hand slipped into her pocket, touching the folded map. She had planned her escape alone, every step counted, but nowhere in that plan was there room for a human driver. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you stop for me?" Joran tilted his head. "Because you looked like you needed a ride." "That's it?" she asked sharply. "That's it," he said. Then after a pause, he added, "You'd be surprised how many people need to run away from something. You're not the first." His words made her chest tighten. Not the first. How many others had sat here desperate, hunted, afraid? The taxi turned into a darker part of the city now, where the lights grew dim and the streets below were filled with shadows. Joran seemed to know the way without hesitation, twisting through hidden paths as if he had done it 1,000 times. But Elira could not ignore the fear building inside her. She leaned forward slightly. "You could take me back. You could hand me over and collect a reward." Joran's eyes flicked to the mirror again. "True, I could." Her breath caught. "But I won't." "Why?" she whispered. He gave a shrug. "I don't like cages. I don't like people being forced into them either." The words hit her harder than she expected. She turned her face toward the window, hiding her expression. For the first time that night, she felt something besides fear. A spark of understanding. The city outside grew rougher. Old factories lined the roads, their chimneys silent and broken. Graffiti glowed on walls, written in languages Elira barely understood. Figures moved in the shadows, watching as the taxi passed. Joran slowed the vehicle and pulled into an empty alley. The taxi settled quietly on the ground. Elira's body tensed. "Why are we stopping?" "Because," Joran said, switching off the engine. "Patrols are closing in on this district. If we keep moving, they'll spot us. Better to hide until they pass." He leaned back in his seat, completely calm. "Don't worry. I've done this before." But Elira could not stay calm. Every minute felt dangerous. Every silence felt heavy. She kept glancing at the windows, expecting guards to appear at any second. Then, from the shadows outside, a faint noise reached her ears. The sound of boots, the sound of voices, patrols. Joran sat up straight, eyes narrowing. He didn't look, afraid, only focused. He placed a finger on his lips, signaling her to stay silent. Elira's heart pounded wildly. She crouched lower in her seat, holding her breath. The red beams of scanners swept across the alley walls, drawing closer. If they opened the taxi, if they saw her, everything would end. The footsteps grew louder. The beams came closer. Then suddenly, silence. The voices faded. The beams moved away. The patrol had passed. Elira exhaled sharply, her hands shaking. She looked at Joran, who calmly restarted the engine. "See," he said, almost casually. "I told you, not my first time." She stared at him, speechless. He was strange, this human driver. Strange, but safe. For the first time that night, Elira allowed herself to believe she might actually escape. But deep inside, she also knew one thing. This human was no ordinary driver. The taxi slid back into the sky, weaving between tall towers like a shadow. Elira leaned against the cold glass of the window, watching the endless maze of lights and streets below. The city felt alive, breathing with machines and whispers, but to her it was a cage she had finally broken free from. Still, her chest remained tight. Freedom was close, yet danger followed every step. She was not safe, not yet. The driver, Joran, sat with steady hands on the controls. His face was calm, almost too calm. He acted as if carrying fugitives was nothing new. Elira wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but fear kept her lips sealed. After some time, Joran broke the silence. "You can keep glaring at me, or you can tell me where you're trying to go. Makes my job easier." Elira pulled her scarf tighter around her face. "Just take me away from the patrols." "That's not an answer," he said. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Running without a destination will only get you caught. She turned her eyes away. You don't need to know. Joran sighed, adjusting the controls as the taxi dipped lower, flying through a hidden passage between two abandoned towers. Fine. Keep your secrets. But if I'm risking my neck, I'd like to know it's for something real. His words made her bristle. I never asked for your help. No, Joran said, eyes flicking to her in the mirror. But you climbed into my taxi anyway. That makes us a team, whether you like it or not. Elira had no reply. She hated that he was right. Outside, a sudden flash of red light cut across the night. A patrol ship appeared above, its engines growling as it scanned the streets. Joran cursed under his breath and steered sharply into a side lane. The taxi shook as it dove between buildings. Hold on, he muttered. Elira grabbed the seat in front of her, her heart hammering. The patrol's beam followed, chasing them through the narrow streets. Sirens wailed in the distance, echoing like angry horns. Joran pulled the controls and the taxi spun sharply, sliding under a bridge just as the beam passed overhead. Sparks flew as the vehicle scraped against steel, but it kept moving. Elira's stomach twisted with fear. She turned toward him, her voice trembling. They know, they're looking for me. Of course they're looking for you, Joran said. His tone was dry, as if it were obvious. But don't worry, they're fast, I'm faster. The taxi roared forward, darting through smaller roads where traffic was thin. Elira could feel every movement, every turn, every near miss. Her breath came quick and shallow. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. What? Helping me. You don't even know who I am. Joran kept his eyes forward. Like I said before, I don't like cages and I don't like seeing someone dragged into one. Elira stared at him, her chest tightening. The way he said it, it was more than just words. He meant it. He had lived it. But before she could ask more, the taxi shook violently. A new patrol ship had appeared ahead, blocking the road. Its red lights flashed, and its speakers boomed. Stop immediately. Joran swore again. Hold tight. The taxi jerked upward, engines screaming as it soared between two towers. The patrol followed close behind, firing warning shots that lit up the night. Explosions echoed, shaking windows and rattling pipes. Elira ducked low, covering her head. Fear raced through her veins. If they were caught now, everything would end. But Joran's face remained set, eyes sharp, hands steady. He twisted the controls, sending the taxi spiraling down a narrow passage barely wider than the vehicle itself. The patrol ship tried to follow, but it was too big. Sparks erupted as it scraped the walls, forcing it to slow. Joran smirked. Told you, faster. The taxi burst out of the passage and into a darker part of the city. Factories loomed, their smokestacks broken, their windows shattered. Here, the lights were few and shadows ruled. Elira pressed her back against the seat, her chest still heaving. You're insane, she whispered. Maybe, Joran said with a small grin. But you're alive, aren't you? She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He had saved her. Again, still, her mind swirled with questions. Who was this man, really? Why did he risk so much for her? A stranger. The taxi slowed as they entered a quiet district. Joran parked the vehicle in the shadow of a broken tower, switching off the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Elira's ragged breathing. She turned to him. If you're smart, you'll leave me here. Go before they catch you too. Joran looked at her for a long moment. And if I don't want to? Her eyes narrowed. Then you're a fool. Maybe, he said, leaning back in his seat. But I don't leave people behind. Not anymore. Something in his tone caught her attention. Not anymore, she repeated softly. But Joran didn't answer. He simply started the engine again, guiding the taxi deeper into the shadows of the old city. Elira sat quietly, her mind full of storms. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. And yet, she was beginning to wonder if this strange human might be the only reason she would survive the night. The night sky roared with sirens. Elira gripped the seat as Joran's taxi shot forward like an arrow. The silence of the old district was gone. Now the city trembled with the sound of patrol engines hunting them. Behind, 3 patrol ships glowed with flashing red lights. Their voices boomed across the air. "Stop immediately, you are under arrest." Elira's throat tightened. "They found us." "Of course they did," Joran muttered, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "But catching us? That's another story." The taxi swerved sharply, diving between 2 crumbling towers. The patrols followed, their beams cutting through the shadows. Bright blasts lit up the sky as warning shots exploded near them. Elira ducked low, covering her head. The windows rattled, the frame of the taxi shaking under the force. Every second felt like it would be their last. "Hold tight!" Joran shouted. The taxi spun sideways, sliding through a narrow tunnel under an old factory. Sparks flew as the wings scraped steel, but the vehicle pushed through. The patrols tried to follow, but the tunnel was too tight. 2 pulled back, but 1 ship forced itself in, engines screaming. "They won't stop," Elira whispered. "Good," Joran said, with a sharp grin. "Neither will I." He slammed the throttle. The taxi shot upward through a broken roof, smashing into open air. The sudden light blinded Elira for a moment, but when her eyes adjusted, she saw the patrol ship burst out of the factory behind them, still chasing. The city opened wide before them, a jungle of lights and steel. Sky lanes were crowded with civilian traffic, lines of hovercars moving like glowing rivers. Joran steered the taxi straight into the chaos. Alarms screamed as other cars swerved to avoid them. Elira's stomach twisted as they zigzagged through the lanes, the patrol ship pushing closer. "This is madness," she cried. "This," Joran said, jerking the wheel, "is survival." The taxi dove between 2 heavy cargo haulers, so close. Elira could see sparks scrape off their engines. The patrol ship tried the same move, but clipped one of the haulers. The massive vehicle spun, horns blaring, blocking the lane behind them. 2 more patrols caught up from the side, closing in like wolves. Their beams flashed across the taxi, locking on. Elira's hands trembled. "They'll shoot us down." "Not if we hide," Joran said quickly. He yanked the controls and the taxi nosedived into a lower level of the city, where shadows thickened and smog covered the streets. The air grew darker, heavier. Old pipes hissed steam, neon signs flickered, and broken bridges stretched across the sky. Here the lights of patrol ships seemed dimmer, their engines echoing off steel walls. Elira pressed her face against the window. "Where are we?" "The Undercity," Joran answered. "Not the best place for a joyride, but perfect for losing company." The patrols followed, their lights searching through the gloom. Explosions shook the air as they fired into the darkness. Joran spun the taxi left, then right, weaving through pipes and half-collapsed towers. A shot clipped the rear of the taxi, and alarms screamed from the console. Smoke trailed behind them. Elira's eyes widened in panic. "They hit us." "Just a scratch," Joran growled, fighting the controls. "This old bird's tougher than she looks." But Elira could feel the vibration under her feet, the engine struggling. She knew they couldn't last forever. Another patrol appeared in front of them, blocking the path. Its cannons glowed, ready to fire. Joran narrowed his eyes. "Not today." He slammed a switch and the taxi lurched sideways, scraping along the wall of a tower. Metal screeched, sparks flew, and Elira screamed, but the sudden move sent them sliding under the patrol ship at the last second. The blast fired too late, hitting the wall behind them in a burst of fire. Joran straightened the taxi and pulled upward, gasping for breath. That was close. Elira's hands clutched the seat, her knuckles white. Her whole body shook, but inside her chest was a strange spark. Fear, yes, but also awe. This human wasn't just a driver. He was a fighter, a survivor. Still, the patrols weren't done. They regrouped above, engines roaring as they dove after the taxi again. "They'll never stop," Elira whispered. "They'll chase us forever." Joran glanced at her through the mirror. "Then we make sure they can't." "What do you mean?" He pointed ahead. In the distance, through the heavy smog, Elira saw the glowing skeleton of an unfinished tower. Its steel beams jutted out like knives and construction platforms floated around it, half abandoned. "We go through there," Joran said firmly. "That's suicide." "Maybe," he admitted. "But it's our only chance." The taxi roared forward straight toward the skeletal tower. Patrols followed close, their beams cutting across the smog. Joran twisted the controls, sending the taxi spinning between steel beams at impossible angles. Alira clung to the seat, her screams lost in the thunder of engines. The patrols tried to follow, but the beams tore into their wings. One ship crashed into a girder, exploding in fire. Another lost control, spinning down into the smog. Only one. Patrol remained, chasing close behind. Joran's eyes burned with focus. He aimed the taxi toward a collapsing platform, its edges glowing with sparks. At the last second, he pulled upward. The taxi cleared the wreckage, but the patrol was too slow. The platform snapped, crashing into the ship. Flames erupted, lighting the undercity in a brief explosion. Silence followed. The patrols were gone. Alira sat frozen, her chest heaving, sweat running down her face. Slowly, she turned toward Joran. He leaned back in his seat, wiping his brow. "Told you," he said with a small smile. "Faster." For the first time, Alira didn't argue. She just stared at him, her fear mixing with something else, something she couldn't name. But deep in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. The city behind them was quiet again, but the silence did not bring peace. Smoke still trailed from the rear of the taxi, and the engine hissed with protest. After the chase, Alira's body was exhausted, her muscles trembling from fear. Joran guided the taxi lower into the shadows of the undercity. The glowing towers were gone now. Here, the air was thick with smog and dust, and broken lights flickered above narrow streets. The taxi slowed until it drifted into an abandoned hangar, its doors half broken and rusted. The engine cut off with a groan, and silence fell. Alira exhaled deeply, her breath shaky. For the first time since escaping the mansion, she felt stillness. No alarms, no patrol ships, only the faint drip of water echoing inside the hangar. Joran leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. Then he spoke in his usual calm tone. "We'll stay here for a while. Let the heat cool down. Patrols won't search this deep." Alira hesitated before asking, "You've done this before?" He opened one eye and looked at her. "A few times." Her hands tightened around her scarf. The question burned in her chest, but she forced herself to ask, "Why do you keep helping people like me? You don't even know me. You don't even ask who I am." Joran shrugged. "I don't need to. I can see it in your eyes." Her heart skipped. "See what?" "Cages," he said simply. His gaze drifted upward to the cracked ceiling. "I know the look of someone trapped. Doesn't matter if it's iron bars, family rules, or the chains of power. A cage is a cage." Alira stared at him. His words cut deep, sharper than she expected. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hangar felt heavier with silence. Finally, she broke it. "I was being forced into marriage. My family, they wanted me to belong to a man I did not choose. Someone powerful, someone cold." Her voice trembled as she spoke. "If I stayed, my life would not be mine anymore. I would live behind walls until I died." Her throat ached. She turned away, ashamed of the tears that threatened to fall. She had promised herself she would be strong. But the words, once spoken, carried the weight of truth. Joran's voice was quiet. "And so you ran?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." There was no judgment in his tone, no pity. Only understanding. Alira risked a glance at him. "And you? What about you, Joran? Why do you speak of cages as if you've lived in one?" He did not answer right away. His fingers traced the steering controls absently, his jaw tight. "At last," he said, "because I have." Her breath caught. Joran leaned forward, resting his elbows on the console. "Humans in this city. You know how it is. We're workers, servants, tools, nothing more. I grew up in the lower districts, same as every human child. Factories, smoke, orders shouted down at us. We were expected to stay small, stay quiet. That was our place. His voice hardened. But I never stayed quiet. I fought back. They didn't like that. So they punished me. He pulled off one glove and showed her his hand. Scars ran across his skin. Faint but deep lines burned into flesh. Elira's stomach twisted at the sight. They wanted to break me, Joran continued, his tone flat. Make me into something obedient. But I didn't break. I left. I stole. This taxi, rebuilt it with my own hands, and I swore I'd never be chained again. Elira couldn't look away. His story, his scars, his fire, it was raw and real. She saw now that his calmness wasn't weakness. It was control, forged in pain. Her voice came out softer than she expected. So you help others escape. Because no one helped you. Joran's eyes met hers in the mirror. For a moment she thought he would deny it. But he didn't. He simply nodded once. The air between them grew heavy again, but different this time. It wasn't silence filled with suspicion. It was silence filled with shared pain. Elira leaned back, her scarf falling slightly from her face. She no longer felt the same fear when she looked at him. Instead, she felt something else. A fragile thread of trust. But that trust was fragile indeed. Suddenly, the faint sound of engines echoed outside the hangar. Elira's body stiffened. Patrols? She whispered. Joran's hand went to the controls. His jaw clenched as he listened. The sound grew louder, hovering near the entrance. He shook his head slowly. Not patrols. Something else. Elira's skin prickled. Then who? Before he could answer, a shadow moved across the hangar's doorway. The sound of footsteps followed, steady and deliberate. Joran's eyes narrowed. Someone knows we're here. Elira's heart pounded again, fear rushing back into her veins. She looked at him, her voice trembling. What do we do? Joran's hand tightened around the throttle. His calm voice returned, sharp and focused. We survive. The door creaked open, and the figure stepped inside. The hangar was drowned, in silence broken only by the echo of footsteps. Elira's breath caught in her throat. Shadows moved slowly across the dusty floor, stretching long and sharp in the dim light. Joran kept one hand on the throttle, and the other near a hidden switch. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Stay quiet. The figure stepped inside, tall and cloaked, their face hidden behind a dark mask. For a moment they only stood there as if listening to the walls. Then their voice cut through the silence, mechanical and cold. You've run far, Elira, but not far enough. Elira's blood froze. They knew her name. She stumbled back, her hand gripping the edge of the seat. How do you know who I am? The figure moved closer, boots clicking against the floor. Your family sent us. Did you really think you could escape their reach? The city belongs to them. Every tower, every patrol, every whisper in the dark. You cannot hide from us. Elira's chest tightened. She had feared her family's influence, but hearing it now, spoken so clearly, crushed her hope. Joran, however, didn't flinch. His voice stayed calm, but hard as stone. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The masked figure tilted their head slightly. A human protecting her? Interesting, but foolish. Do you really think you matter in this world? Joran smirked faintly. Maybe not. But I matter enough to make this difficult. The figure raised a hand, signaling something unseen. From the shadows behind them, more shapes appeared. 2 soldiers in armor, carrying long rifles that glowed faintly at the tips. Elira's heart pounded. Joran, she whispered. Stay behind me, he said firmly. His eyes never left the intruders. The air grew thick with tension. One of the soldiers stepped forward, aiming his rifle. Hand her over. No one needs to get hurt. Joran's answer was simple. No. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger. In a blur, Joran slammed the hidden switch on his console. The taxi's floodlights exploded to life, blinding the soldiers. Alira shielded her eyes as Joran shouted, "Run!" They dashed out of the taxi, sprinting across the hangar. Shots rang out, searing the air with bursts of light. Sparks flew from the walls as bullets struck metal. Alira's scarf whipped behind. Her as she ran, fear burning through every step. Joran grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a stack of crates. He leaned close, whispering quickly, "We can't stay here. There's a ship at the far end. Old, maybe broken, but it might fly." Alira gasped. "A ship? You mean we leave the city?" His eyes locked onto hers. "If we stay, you're dead. If we leave, maybe you have a chance." The words shook her. All her life, the city had been her prison. The idea of leaving it, leaving everything behind, was terrifying. But the thought of being dragged back to her family was worse. She nodded, her voice trembling. "Then we go." Joran gave a sharp nod. He peeked over the crates. The masked figure barked orders, the soldiers fanning out. They were searching, the shadows carefully now, rifles ready. Time was running out. "On my signal," Joran whispered. Alira clutched the folded map in her pocket, though she knew it was useless now. Her path had changed. This was no longer about reaching the spaceport. This was about something bigger. Joran rose suddenly, firing a small flare gun he had pulled from his jacket. The flare shot upward, exploding into a shower of sparks that blinded the soldiers again. "Go!" he shouted. Alira ran. Her feet pounded against the steel floor as she dashed toward the far end of the hangar. Joran was right behind her, his footsteps strong and steady. At the end, half covered in dust and broken wires, stood a small starship. Its hull was rusted, its wings crooked, but its cockpit glowed faintly with power. Alira stared at it, her chest heaving. "It'll never fly." Joran smirked, shoving her toward the ramp. "You'd be surprised what broken things can do." They scrambled inside. The ship smelled of oil and dust, its seats torn, but the controls flickered weakly with light. Joran sat at the pilot's chair, his hands moving quickly over the switches. Come on, come on!" The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The floor shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Behind them, the masked figure shouted, "Stop them!" Soldiers fired, bullets slamming against the ship's hull. Alira ducked, her hands over her head. Sparks burst around them. Joran gritted his teeth and pulled the throttle. "Hold on!" The ship shuddered, engines screaming, and slowly lifted from the ground. More shots hit, but the hull held. The masked figure stepped forward, their voice echoing. "You cannot escape your destiny, Alira. We will find you, even beyond the stars." Alira's eyes burned as she stared back through the cockpit window. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt defiance. The ship surged upward, breaking through the hangar roof. Debris rained down as it soared into the night sky. The city below shrank, its towers glowing faintly like the bars of a cage left behind. Joran leaned back, sweat on his brow, but a smile tugged at his lips. "We're free." Alira sat beside him, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. But inside, her chest something new bloomed. Hope. She turned to Joran. "Where do we go now?" He glanced at her, his eyes steady. "Anywhere, everywhere, the stars are open." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the engines. Then, a red light blinked on the console. Joran's smile faded. "Wait. No." Alira leaned forward. "What is it?" The screen lit up with a symbol. Her family's crest. They had already locked onto the ship's signal. Joran's jaw tightened. "They're still coming." Alira's breath caught. They weren't safe yet. Their journey had only begun, and somewhere beyond the stars, danger was already waiting.